and welcome to another episode of Northside Now. This is the podcast where we take you on a tour through all of the ministries and the latest happenings around Northside Church to keep you better connected with your church family. My name is Patrick, and with me as always are my fabulous co-hosts, Glenn Miller and Kevin Bryant.
Hey, morning.
What's up, guys?
Good afternoon. Good evening.
That's right, all of them together.
Yeah, how are you?
I'm doing all right. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
You want to introduce our very special
We do. We have a very special guest with us today. Local celebrity.
Yes.
Kelly McAlister.
I don't know about that.
That's true, though.
Well, I guarantee that there would be more people to recognize your face than mine around here. So if that qualifies, that means at least there's some celebrity there. But yeah, welcome.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
I think I met you originally going to WBBJ to promote the youth musicals. I think
yes.
was the first time I ever met you. But how many times do you get people, I watched WBBJ for a million years, and I feel like I know you, and they come up feel like they could tell you anything?
It's very flattering because I feel like I was part of their family for a few years, so I always consider that quite the compliment. But it happens less and less now because it's been about almost, 6 years maybe since I left.
wow.
Yeah, I know. Time flies.
Yeah, it does. It does. And, when you're doing stuff like that, I can only imagine.
Glenn's just a little tongue-tied right now.
Well,
He's
starstruck.
He's got all the posters of you on his wall.
No.
He's not usually at a loss for words.
No.
We'll get an autograph later for you, Glenn.
No, we've talked a lot about news, and I want to ask a million news questions because it cracks me up. Because I feel like news people ought to be certified.
You think we should be, shouldn't we?
You should get say that you are certified to tell the news. If I'm certified to do heart surgery, I should be able to tell the news, right? Isn't that the same?
It should be. No, usually that comes with a degree in some form of journalism, but rules are different. Journalism has changed so much just in the time that I've left, with social media, with citizen journalism, if you will, everything has changed. And I think the COVID also, just the looseness and the expectation level is not, I don't think, quite as high as when I first started. But now I sound old, like back when I was in the business. And so I want to also evolve with the genre, but there are some things about the business that I miss.
Yeah, it was always fun to go in there and watch them do the weather.
The green wall, they're touching nothing.
Yeah, like when Mo's doing the weather, you could always know. It's like, there's a green wall there.
It really does take a lot of practice. I could never do that because you actually are looking at yourself backwards.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
I'm not coordinated enough for that.
Me neither. That's why I didn't do weather.
So how does that work? So if in Jackson, let's say, and I always feel like Jackson's kind of like a training ground for new talent, and it's kind of move up through the pipeline, I guess. Met so many of them over the years, and they're so nice, and some of them are so young. They're like, Jackson. So, but how does that work? So does the news and stuff funnel in from a larger headquarters down to, let's say, national news? I figured local news is pretty obvious. Y'all run out and do the little reports. So does the national news, does it come down from bigger places, or do y'all get like the little teletypes of
kind of
how does that
more
work?
Modern version? But yes, like most stations are affiliated with a network. So WBBJ is ABC and CBS, so they get national news from their ABC and CBS affiliates across the country, as well as the national news. And then you can also subscribe to be a CNN affiliate, and so you get content from CNN and give content back as well. So that's how they get their news around the country and know what is going on everywhere.
Well, that's cool.
Yeah. But Jackson is kind of a training ground. TV markets are tiered. New York's number one, LA, Chicago, and it just kind of goes down. I think Jackson at last count was in the 170s. And so generally you start and you try to climb your way up, and that's where you make more money and get more exposure.
Hey, you know what? That's higher than I thought we'd be on the list.
Yeah.
But do you know how many's on the list?
And I do not.
A bunch.
175?
Close. I think it's about 200.
Oh,
okay.
wow.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Because I also used to Dallas, Dallas-Fort Worth area.
Which is the
a little
number
bigger.
4, I think.
Yeah, really big. And then I moved out to East Texas one time, and Tyler, Texas was the local
much
news.
Less, yeah.
Much
Closer to
less.
Jackson size.
And then, but moving to Jackson, I felt like I was moving back to Dallas almost.
Oh,
That's how small it was back then. That was a long time ago, but it was really like, hey, I'm moving up to where we get real news again. So, and not that, Bubba killed a deer at 4 o'clock in the morning with his ATV. And what was he doing at 4 o'clock in the morning with his ATV? But, not that wasn't news, but
They did the news like it's like Wayne's World, public access from their basement. Is that how they did it?
Yeah, pretty close.
That would have been great, though.
Pretty close, but it's even grown a lot more since then. But yeah, it's about Jackson's size, I guess, now. So, and then you moved on, and now you're the
Public information officer.
Information officer for the TBI, right?
Right. I'm one of 4. I'm based here in West Tennessee. We have offices across the state, and I serve the entire state, but I primarily work out of the Jackson office in Memphis. So I handle our affairs basically in the 21 counties of West Tennessee.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so they kind of tell you what to say, right?
You know, the law is very specific about what we can and cannot say. Most of TBI files are considered confidential, so we really can't talk about a lot unless it's part of an open public record, something that's said or stated in court or a document that's been filed. So we have to watch what we say quite closely.
But then does it drive you crazy that they ask the same questions? And they know that, right?
Yes.
They know y'all can't, but why do they?
Well, because I was a reporter and I know.
So that's you.
So you're hoping to wear them down. Or you just catch them. If you can phrase it just a little bit differently, maybe they will answer you a little bit differently. No, but
So it's a little bit of a game.
It is. Yeah. It's definitely back and forth. It's like a chess game. Back and forth for sure.
Yeah, because that's got to be wearing out. Like when the president has the press secretary has they do those every day.
Right.
It's the same stuff. It's got to be wearing. So.
It is. Sometimes what you want to say is not what you can say.
Yeah, exactly.
But we have to choose our words wisely and kindly. Yeah.
One of the things I wanted to ask you, you talked about this a little bit. You got a degree in journalism. Is that where you started? So there's ethics component of that education, right? And we've talked about this recently with AI and medical ethics. And the question has come up to me many times. You talked about how the news cycle and organizations are so decentralized and almost anybody can be a news reporter, a citizen journalist you talked about. And we see at the national level, 24-hour news cycles, you definitely know there are biases in terms of this network kind of represents this kind of bias, this network, maybe this one. And so I think about my kids as they're growing up, and I've heard several, I'm not sure if there's anything here in this area, but I've heard and read about how there are now some kinds of coursework that help kids understand and how to figure out what's real, what's news or what's important, and how to sort through all of news is entertainment for sure, has been for a very long time. But what do you see as maybe problematic or things in the news business that we have now? How do you determine what's real versus what's a bias? I know in 24 cable, well, it's not cable necessarily anymore. We've talked about the death of cable too, but you need to have content to fill that time.
Exactly.
And so there's a lot of opinion. And because it comes from a news organization, it comes across as news sometimes. I wonder how today's kids are going to understand where they give information. Because I will say, and I'll stop talking here in a second and let you answer, but a lot of the things that I sometimes hear from my kids is that it's stated as fact, but they got it from TikTok or they saw it on Pinterest. And it influences them to, this is what I should be doing, or this is whatever hair care routine that they're using, etc. That's real. And they find out maybe it doesn't really work like they thought. How do we discern what's real? How should we approach news today? How is the coursework in journalism schools changed to deal with our current environment?
It's changed so much since the time I was in school many years ago. But when I talk to young journalists, I always stress the difference between fact and truth. Because I can sit here right now and say, Glenn just stole my purse. That is a fact when you repeat it. Keli just said Glenn stole her purse, but is it true? So I think that's an important lesson for us as parents and adults, that we help our children and our young people understand that there is a big difference. When I was in journalism, when I first started in journalism, it was very much that you never had an opinion. You didn't have an opinion about politics. You didn't have an opinion about sports team. You're middle of the road, and that's where you stayed. I lived in Seattle. I worked in Seattle. We cheered for the Seahawks because we lived in Seattle. And you were okay to have that little bit of bias there. But generally, you were supposed to stay middle of the road. And it's just not the same anymore. You see your mainstream main network reporters and anchors, and they clearly have a spoken bias toward whomever or whatever situation or person. And I find that very disappointing. You see them endorse candidates, and I still run by that guideline to a certain extent. I don't like people to know what I think and who I favor because, even in the work that I do now, it can impact different things. So it's very disappointing and it's hard. I don't really have the answer other than knowing that as a parent with 2 young children, that I'm going to have to make sure that their source of information and their thought process is thorough and complete, and they're able to make their own decisions by hearing other opinions. And, hopefully help guide them not to be crazy.
Yeah. I mean,
isn't that the goal of every parent?
Always. That is my guiding goal. Yeah.
Of course, if the parents are crazy like me, then they don't have a chance. Yeah.
Right? And that's some of the reason I said earlier, I think if you're going to tell the news about Bubba burning over a deer, you should be certified to do that instead of if you're going to be an opinion commentary person. But I know the Constitution is a major issue with all of that too. So, but I'm with you because in youth ministry, not long ago, it was a few years ago, it came out, all the kids coming in, and all of a sudden we were out here eating dinner on a Sunday night, and they started talking, and I could hear, what are y'all talking about? Helen Keller. Well, yeah, she wasn't real.
Oh.
Helen Keller wasn't around.
I remember you saying this, yeah.
And I about passed out. I mean, I was like, almost hit the floor.
Right.
What are you talking about? And so, but no, they totally believe that. And where they picked that up, it never really could figure out where they picked that up. But it's like a big thing on the internet. That Helen Keller is not even a thing. So and you're just like, no, what in the world? So from the church's standpoint, which y'all go to church here and you and your family, and when you're talking about truth, that's when people start going, well, and it's tough. I mean, to believe is to have faith is a struggle because we want to be, there's so much Thomas in us. We want to touch and feel and taste and smell, right? So, that's the thing. I think, you're talking about our kids, what they're running into these days. I think that's some of the stuff. And from the church's point of view, you want them to be able to trust truth.
Well, even as adults, I think we've talked about this before, our society is very polarized at this point in time. If you're not in one camp or the other, you're an outcast. You're not, you don't belong to whatever. And we all as humans want to belong somewhere. And that becomes really problematic as we talk about politics or, whatever your things are when it comes to the church, because some churches take very political stands. Some of them are very visible. And so that message communicates pretty easily across all kinds of walks of life. But the problem is that Jesus was apolitical. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't disengage from our public life and our opportunities as citizens to participate, but I do think it becomes more challenging to do that and to represent Christ as a non-kind of political agenda. And I think that's where we kind of fall into some trouble as humans when we, are exclusionary because we're in this camp and we can't see the other side, or we don't really open ourselves up to that in today's society. I think that's a problem that our kids will face, but even as adults, I think.
Yeah, I think you're right, 100%. It's a struggle, and that's the thing is trusting that, and we want to make it easy for kids, right? That's what we want. We want it to be better than it was. And some things are, but yet then there's other little things that some of that they help create.
There's definitely distrust in our society, just really exacerbated ever since COVID. But I follow a lot of conspiracy theory. And so that's probably not good for me because in conspiracy theory world, nobody's telling the truth ever. And so how do we get back to trusting each other?
Yeah, trust is a big deal. So, and it's like the reason I'm answering that text right now because somebody has trust issues.
Because I just think about the news too, and it's like even if you've got somebody that is being middle of the road that's just reporting the truth, people just will tend to not believe them if it doesn't quite fit their particular opinion or worldview or whatever. So how do we? I don't know what the answer is. I'm just
and Kelly, you may have seen this too. At the top level, when it's so very competitive in terms of that as a career, if you are just middle of the road and don't have an opinion, you're not sensational enough potentially to win the spot.
Yeah. You're no Tucker Carlson.
Exactly. Well, that's
Sorry, I shouldn't throw out names.
I was just thinking about that in particular. When you're talking about viewership and ratings, which all of that is very competitive at the highest level, that's a real thing, right?
Right. But see, what frustrates me is for him to be lumped into a journalist category, because he's not a journalist. He's a commentator. He's a talking head. He's an entertainer.
Right.
He's a host. And there's definitely different rules for him as opposed to an actual journalist. Yeah. But the lines are so blurred, people don't often see that.
When news is in the name of your network.
Right.
Yeah.
It lumps everything into
exactly
all of that is news.
And I think it's important for people to hear is he's not a journalist necessarily. He is an entertainer. And I think he's selling ads. He's doing all of this. He's hitting the number marks that he's got to do. He's a producer. He's producing for his company, right?
He's a content producer, exactly. And headline producer.
Yeah. So how did you get into being a journalist? Is that something, when you were a little girl, you were walking around, telling everybody what everybody in your family did?
No. Well, no, but I did always love being in the know. So I guess kind of. Yeah. But, I went to school. I went to school at Union. And initially I was a psychology major. I had every intention of going to law school. And that first semester of Freud was enough for me. I was too young. I'd come from too small of a place to absorb all of that in. Yeah. And I changed my major midway through my first semester. And they had just kind of a expo, I guess, at one of the gyms at Union, and all the departments were there. And I was like, communications, journalism, and went and talked to them and kind of fell into that and changed my major and never looked back. So
nice.
Yeah, it was great. I finished Union and literally finished my last final and started at WBBJ the next day.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's lucky. Kevin was mentioning it's just hard and it's a lot of competition.
It is.
What about even at the smaller markets like Jackson? You get this dump of journalists and these people that want to be news reporters and sports people and da-da-da.
Right.
And so how is it in the younger markets too? Because, we do see that rotation come through about graduation time.
Generally, at least when you start, your contract is anywhere from 2 to 3 years. Okay. So it's usually around 2 years. So that's usually the life expectancy of a new reporter. And then they want to move on. And that's what I did. I ended up staying at WBBJ my first go round. I was there for a little bit more than 3 years and wanted to move on and be bigger and better and learn more and all that kind of stuff, experience more. And I applied and accepted a job in Oklahoma City. So I was in Oklahoma City for about 4 years. And then again, the bug hit and my contract was up, and I moved to Seattle, Washington, and worked up there for about 3 years, a little bit more than 3 years, and never thought I'd ever move back to Jackson. Never say never, right?
Right.
And as luck and God would have it, I ended up back in Jackson and at WBBJ.
So you said you've been away from that particular side of things for 6 years or so. What is the one thing that you miss the most, and what's the one thing you don't miss at all?
The one thing I don't miss at all, I'll hit with that first. Yeah. I don't think anyone realizes unless you're in the business, and that goes for, I think, any career. You don't really know what goes into the career unless you're in the career. And I probably worked, I would say 70 to 80 hours a week.
Wow.
I mean, my phone would start ringing in the morning. I would get into the office anywhere from 12:30 to 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and I would leave well after midnight. And then it would just start over again, and I was on call on the weekends. And so when I came back the second time, I was in more of a supervisor role, and I was able to help the young journalist, help guide them, help them decide if this was really the profession that they wanted to be in. And so it just was a very heavy load. So I loved being able to guide and teach, but it was overwhelming, the amount of hours that I put into it. And even before I would get into the office, I would do events or make appearances or help out with different events in the community. So I felt like I was working all the time. So that I don't miss that. And it's not really something that I could ever continue on as a mom and wife.
Yeah.
But what I miss is just the camaraderie and the people. I work with such sweet, kind people, people who have been at that station for as long as I can remember through my first go round. And then just seeing the young talent and young people come and go and see where they are now. I have some folks that I work with that are working, in New York City and Chicago and Nashville, throughout the state of Tennessee. So it's fun to watch and see them grow and be. But I believe in seasons in life, and I loved working in television journalism. I absolutely loved it. I never thought I would do anything else. I thought I would die with a microphone in my hand because I loved it so much. But seasons change. I got married. I had babies, and all of a sudden, like, my focus of wanting to be just focusing on my career, it just shifted. And so now I'm able to work and still balance out my family.
Yeah, and a lot of people won't realize that, especially as you're starting out, you do almost everything, right?
Yes.
You do the camera, the setup, all the interviewing, of course, and the research and all that stuff. As you get to a higher level, you have people that help you do that. Yes. But yeah, it's a lot of work.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot.
But you make millions like those people on Fox.
Billions,
gazillions, and not at WBBJ.
Yeah. I think that's one of the interesting things. Is a lot of people think, oh, they're news. They make, it's like if you own a business, all of a sudden you just have all kinds of work.
Right.
So it's an interesting thing. So now you work with the TBI.
I do.
And that's quite a bit of a change. So you have all these reporters coming at you.
Yes.
And so you have this story that you have to tell, or these facts that everybody's wanting a hold of so they can go tell their story
right.
about it. So you're kind of a barrier, but yet you want the public to know.
Right.
Walk through that with us a little bit
Sure.
about how that works, because, like we mentioned the press secretary and stuff like that earlier, that's got to be, anytime you're kind of that person, that point person everybody's looking to for a million answers on one side, and over here they're saying, this is what I want you to tell, that's right. Got to be a crazy place. So you're kind of standing in a gap for people.
It is. We help control the flow of public information for our cases, and our agents are able to tell us all the details, but then all of the details have to get smushed down to very limited and controlled amount of information that we are legally able to share. Mm-hmm. And so knowing everything and not saying everything is probably the biggest challenge, and not messing up. Because most importantly, I don't want to break the law, and I don't want to impede the process of justice for the victims or whatever case that we're working on. So it's fun to a certain extent. I feel use the tools that I gathered throughout my entire career in journalism. I also feel like I know the tricks that they're going to try.
Yeah.
And the way they're going to try to phrase things and approach things and call you. And so I do feel like I have also done that. So I feel prepared to a certain extent, not always, because depending on what, the investigation may entail, we may have local journalists. We deal with the Memphis media a lot, which are very different than the Jackson journalists. We have folks that come in from across the country. We have national journalists that come in oftentimes, production companies. So, you have people with all different skill levels that you're dealing with, and a lot of people with their own beliefs in their right to know things. And Tennessee law is different than laws across other states. So, having to oftentimes politely school people, journalists especially, about why we can't say certain things can be frustrating on their end and on ours.
Well, and you're a communicator, I would say, first. And that's part of communications, is how you frame the message, the words you use to communicate the meaning of what you need to say. And that's kind of a fun part of it, I would say. My degree was in communications as well. There's 100 ways you could say one particular thing, and it mean 100 different things. And so the challenge is how you phrase it, how you use the words, tone of voice, all those things. Those are the tools of the trade a little bit, I feel like, too, that you can use. And that's the challenge of it and the fun.
Well, and that's another thing, too, is you can just be like chilling at the house, just not much going on, and all of a sudden, just a few hours, a few moments even, you could be talking about something that's national breaking news.
Yes.
Because the TBI doesn't deal with Bubba hitting a deer on his quad, do they? They deal with big stuff, and it's usually something that everybody has an interest in or needs to know. And so you kind of get that adrenaline rush.
It definitely is an
adrenaline
rush.
A little siren on your car.
No,
Here comes Keli.
They don't trust me with that. They don't trust me with that at all. But we do occasionally, we'll get phone calls, or I'll get a phone call in the middle of the night. It doesn't happen as much as, honestly, in television news, but I do get those, and usually it means a trip to Nashville or to Memphis. Sometimes Tyrese will also have something. My husband will have something that will coincide, and so we'll call our babysitter and say, "Hey, we need to put you on standby because we may have to leave in a couple hours." I'll tell this story. It was during a fall break, and we decided to stay at home. And so I was still working. One of the boys was still at home with me. The other one was at daycare, and we had a situation, and then I had to take him with me. So he sat in the car on FaceTime with his dad while I was handling a situation inside a crime scene. And so he went back to school and told his teachers that his mom took him to a crime scene for spring break. Or it was fall break, actually. But I was like, oh my goodness, the stories he will have to tell.
That's right.
That is awesome.
Luckily though, she knows what we do for a living, and so not a lot of alarm, but nevertheless, it was funny to hear him say, my mom took me to a crime scene and McDonald's. That was because we don't usually eat McDonald's, and he was so excited that we got to eat McDonald's.
Oh, no. Crime scene and McDonald's.
And McDonald's,
What
mostly
a day.
McDonald's. Yeah.
What a combo.
All of the highlights.
But to Glenn's point, you probably have gotten pretty good at being very flexible,
Yes.
being ready to go on a moment's notice.
I do. I have all my stuff. I'm in the trunk of my car or the back hatch of my car. So I have extra clothes, boots, a bulletproof vest,
Wow.
She's got a go bag.
The regular.
Definitely my go bag.
Yeah.
So how different, because I have a couple more questions about this part. So how different
The bulletproof vest in particular.
Yeah, because that propped it up. So how different is real life versus like TV life? Do y'all watch the different shows and go like, that's not how that's done?
We mostly just watch children's shows if we
Yeah.
do
Oh,
get to watch shows, but it's always much more sensational and much more easy and simple and glamorous on television than it is in real life.
All right, so we have to ask you this question because
Sure.
you mentioned children's shows. Is your family a Bluey family?
Yes.
All right, well,
All right.
Aren't they? They're so sweet.
this
Yeah.
is a Bluey approved podcast.
Oh, good. We love Bluey and Bingo. Yes.
So Patrick was like the other day, he was like, how can you do this as a parent? How can you do all these games?
We're just now getting into Bluey at my house. So.
Oh, just wait. It's always phases, and they'll trend out of Bluey, and who knows what's next.
What's the craziest story you ever did? I mean, you're sitting there while you're doing it. You're like out somewhere and you're like, this is ridiculous. Why am I here?
Well, it is hands down. I was working in Washington, and there was a fire that had started in this town, and it just smelled terrible. So we get called out, and it is several hours away, kind of this rural part of Washington. We get out and we try to determine what had caused this fire. And there was just a stench in town. So apparently someone had tossed a cigarette onto a pond of a dairy farm.
Oh,
Do you know that they have poop ponds
yes.
at dairy farms? So, and it also has a crust on it. So once someone had tossed a cigarette, and so it was a poop fire. And so how you're able to talk very seriously, because it's a very serious subject to people who are having to smell poop all the time and not really know what it was initially, but it was a poop fire.
I don't know that I've ever heard the term poop fire before, but
Well, now you have.
Now I have.
Now you have.
I think we got the name for this episode.
Oh, right.
Well, when Barbie and I got married, we lived in Sulphur Springs, Texas, which is Hopkins County, which there's 2.4 dairy cows to every person in that county. I know exactly what you're talking
smell,
about.
don't you?
I know exactly what you're talking about.
And then what they were using to put out
silage.
the fire, they had dropped basically a sprinkler system into the poop pond. So they were spraying the liquid poop to put out the fire on the crust of the poop pond. So try saying that in a serious voice.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, I was hoping maybe for Patrick, we've been talking a lot about Bigfoot and different stuff. How maybe you were out there in the woods in Seattle chasing down Bigfoot.
I never got to see Yeti, but
It's unfortunate.
there were sightings.
Yeah.
Allegedly, yeah.
I have this question because I've sort of been in this circumstance a little bit, but when you're on camera, you're focused on what you're saying and how much do you perceive of what's going on around you? There's all the videos where, somebody's doing something in the background or somebody comes up and hits you with something or obviously you can't be focused on that kind of thing, but just a practical question. What are you thinking about as you do that?
Luckily, when I worked, I always had a photographer with me. So you have someone that's watching your six. But,
Right.
For me, I always tried to stay focused because as soon as you break focus, your mind, you completely forget what you're talking about. I mean, I do that all the time now, but so you try to stay focused because you know that you have someone watching, but you're also on the side of the road. So you're oftentimes aware that there's traffic.
Yeah.
You don't know who's coming up behind you. So it can be a little unnerving, but usually there's other reporters too, a lot of times in large situations. So you feel like there's a little bit of safety in numbers.
And that's something that takes some getting used to. I don't know how you felt when you first started. Of course, you had experience in college with it too, but you're looking at a piece of equipment. You're not looking at a person. So it is different if you try talking to, a camera versus talking to a person, and yet you have to be able to get yourself into the point where you can relate to someone who's actually watching on the other side. But it's really different to do that when you're looking at a teleprompter or whatever else it is. It's pretty hard.
Well, a lot of people always assume that people who are in television are comfortable speaking before crowds, but truthfully, it's a small group of people that's in a studio or during, out in a live shot. So, yeah, it is definitely something you have to get used to. It's a bit of a performance.
But you do both quite a bit. You MC a lot of things.
Yeah, I do. I'm honestly a pretty private person, so I pushed myself out to do that because it was required for so many years. So I do have a bit of comfort, but generally I'm okay just being back in the back, because part of the crowd.
You've done like the Miss Tennessee Volunteer pageant a few times, right?
I did that last year. That was my first year.
Was that your first year?
It was my first year, yes.
I was in the crew, but I got to see you. Of course, you did a fabulous job.
Well, you're very kind. I had no idea what I was doing. Most of the time I don't. But
and you talked about glamorous before. It's glamorous. You get to wear all the clothing and you're the center of attention. And I'm not necessarily equating you with perhaps movies, Hollywood movie stars, but there is a bit of celebrity when you're recognizable. How did you handle that? I ask this question a lot. It's my kids, they're all teenagers. We're all sort of in some way obsessed with fame. And as a culture, we definitely are. Mm-hmm. They get put on a pedestal. But as a celebrity, what's a reasonable right to privacy? And as a public figure, whether you're a philanthropist and that kind of celebrity or a television personality or a entertainer, how do you think about it in terms of your privacy? Obviously, as a person, we like our private things to stay private. But as a public figure, what's the realistic expectation of what that looks like?
I think it's definitely a payoff. And like I said, I consider myself pretty private. I would love to go to the grocery store in a ponytail and no makeup, but, which I can do now. But, the reason that people notice you is the reason that you have a job. So you have to be grateful that people recognize you because they are watching. It was sometimes invasive. It could feel invasive, but truthfully, it was flattering because that meant that they were watching. And that's why this station had hired me and was keeping me. So I was always grateful. And to be asked to do events or to help with projects or nonprofits or anything, it was always such a flattering thing to know that they wanted me to be a spokesperson. But I always say that you have to be very careful with what you want to put out. Like Facebook and Twitter and all that wasn't as huge when I was in the television news business. I take that back. Facebook was. But I never put a lot of stuff out. I didn't put a lot of pictures. I only did public events because I gave folks the amount of information that I was comfortable with giving. And so I think if you want to put everything out, like your salad and your and your puppy and where you walk your dog and where you take your children for fun, if you're putting that on a public-facing platform, you can't ask people not to bother you when you're there. So I think if you want to be a public figure, you have to be wise in the information that you share and protect yourself, protect your loved ones. I never put pictures of my brothers and sisters, my cousins, my mom, my aunts and uncles. I just felt like that was invasive for them. For me, it was different because I could show that I was doing things out in the public, but I didn't show pictures inside my house. I don't show pictures outside of my house. And I think people need to be very aware of that, especially young children, because all of that stuff can be easily shared. Anything that you put out there eventually becomes public. So be very wise in what you share and the pictures that you post.
I always appreciate the celebrities that really keep their children's lives private until they're able to decide for themselves how they want that talked about. But I imagine it is super hard at the highest level to do that. That's why you have to hire teams of people to work on it for you because, as you said, there's so many different reporters. There's so many different shows that are just about entertainment, and they actually further the careers of these people. So it's really a trade-off of how much information is too much, and you need some in order to keep the cycle going.
Beast,
exactly. Feed the beast. I like that. So I imagine it's a really difficult position to be in at that level.
Yeah, I've just got paparazzi chasing me down all the time because of this podcast. I'm just such a celebrity now. It's tough sometimes.
Protect yourself. Protect yourself,
Just be glad your dog is not a superstar.
That's true. How is it? Do people chase Chief down?
They do.
Wanting his autograph?
There's a cat in that neighborhood. It just keeps bothering him and he's driving him crazy. So.
With a camera.
So you came to Union. So obviously it was a Christian university. So you came kind of knowing who Jesus was. Tell us, how did you meet Jesus? How did you become a Christian? What's your faith testimony?
I grew up in North Mississippi. I have a large family, my mom and dad, and then I have, there's 5 of us, an older sister, and I have 3 younger brothers. And so we grew up in this tiny little town in Mississippi, and, you go to church because that's what you do and that's what is expected of you. Not necessarily because you want to, because you have to.
Yeah, I get it.
Because people talk about you.
Right.
And nobody wants you to talk about them. So, I grew up always in church, but our faith was something that was always talked about. We talked about God. We read scripture. We went to church, usually when the doors were open. And again, that became less of a have to and more of a choice as I got older. We had a very active youth group, which I think is just so important for young people. It was kind of cool to be in church, which made it easier. And then your faith takes over and you want to be there. And you all of a sudden, I felt like became the person who helped other people make the choice to come to church and come to special programs. We had a very active youth group. So we would often bring people in from other churches or other denominations even. So I grew up in a Southern Baptist church. And then, I was young. I think I was 10 when I made my profession of faith, and it was very true at the time. But I think as I grew in my faith, I understood more of what it meant to really be a follower of Christ, a believer. And for me, that became less about a denomination, less about a certain faith path, and just more about understanding who God is in my life and how he guides me and how he's directed the flow and direction of where I've gone, the places I've been, the people I've met. So I feel like I hopefully every day am recommitting myself to the walk and being a true believer, not a specific faith or denomination. So I feel like it's a daily path, but I feel like I was put on a path very early to make it an easy choice for me. And so I'm very grateful for my parents and my family for guiding me in the way that they have.
And being in journalism and telling the news and stuff, how was your faith challenged? How was it, poked at from these things of life? Because, you tell some really great stories about poop fires or whatever, but then there would be really tough days.
Right.
And long days, So how was that tested? Do you have accountability partners? Do you just get your quiet place and pray, or do you just sing praise music? What are some of the tools that you use to help you along that path?
I feel like my day is a daily prayer because I feel like I am faltering almost constantly, especially, as a parent. But as a journalist, it's extremely secular business and you're pushed and tempted in many different ways. It's a different lifestyle. I worked basically a second shift my entire career. So I would go to work in the afternoon, work late into the night, and that's when, all the reporters from different stations would go out and, go to bars. And it was just a very different life than what I had grown up in. And so, I always felt like it wasn't hard. I don't know. I think it's a lot because of the base, the foundation that I had growing up. I was always told what was expected of me. And, it was my choice, but just know that there are consequences on the other end if you don't do what you're supposed to. And so it just wasn't hard. I have plenty of friends who are wild partiers and do all the crazy things. And sometimes I was with them. I was usually one driving them or, making sure they got home. Yeah. And by no means was I perfect in any sense of the word. But I do believe that having a strong foundation with my family, with my faith, going to Union just really made it a simpler choice of not being pulled in different directions down the wrong path.
So I really appreciate that because I do think that strong foundation is critical in the path that you take when you wander, how far away you wander and how long it takes you to get back. But as a reporter and trying to be very impartial and objective, you see a lot of people hurting. Were you able to, maybe when the cameras are off or whatever, able to relate with them, maybe minister to them in a way is not quite the right word, but how involved do you get in those stories personally as opposed to having to stay impartial and objective? I think it would be really hard to not relate with the people that were hurting, the victims or whatever it is.
It's definitely balanced because it's your own mental health to a certain degree. I always felt that what I was able to do as a journalist in some cases, when you're able to share a broader story and you're sharing and you're able to help people on a larger platform, I do believe that was something that I felt like I was able to do in many regards as far as helping or sharing a message, allowing people to find new paths to give back to their communities or to help families that were in need or certain groups. So I definitely believe that I was able to do that. And there were times that, I would reach out to them after the fact, probably not ethically what I was supposed to have done. But, there were certain things that really touched our hearts.
You're a human too, right?
Right.
Yeah. And it was good to be reminded of that humanity. A lot of times when you get a bit jaded, when you're just bombarded with truthfully bad news and bad stories and tough things, to remind yourself that you are human and it is okay to care. And it is okay to step outside of that comfort zone and maybe help a family or guide them in another direction to get further help or feel like you're helping the greater good.
Well, and that's a good message for all of us, because we, on the other side of the camera, are consumers of all the news. And there's a lot of bad stories to tell, you know. There's also good stories, and you do find that there are some journalists that have gravitated toward that, whether they're just tired of the bad stuff and they want to focus on the good stuff, or maybe it's their faith or personal convictions that are driving them to do that. And I've always appreciate that too. But in the midst of all the negativity and the bad things, it's important that we as consumers remember too that there's plenty of good stuff
There's always
to go
good.
around.
Yeah.
When we have wars that have been going on for multiple years now, on the national scene, you get a lot of the international news that is not always positive. A lot of it's negative. And I have known people that are just so obsessed with knowing what's going on.
Yeah.
That they just feel the weight of the world on them because they hear all of the international negativity and the things that are being reported, and they tend to forget about the good stuff going on. So that's important for all of us. Good reminder.
Do you ever walk up to someone and say, just turn the news off, Kelly? You say, Kelly, just turn the news off. Don't. So let's talk a little bit about parenting.
Sure.
Because you've seen a lot and you're a parent, exactly to Kevin's point. As a parent, do you ever go like, oh, it's a big scary world out there, But you have boys.
I know.
And
I
your
have
boys crack me up.
They are crazy. They're always the ones running up and down the hall.
They're awesome.
100%. 100, always at 100%. We try to be very realistic. We would love to have a bubble. We both work in law enforcement, so we know more than we probably should. And we have to make sure that we don't let all of that adult stuff really infiltrate into limiting what we allow them to do because of what we know could happen.
Sure.
And not be too scared. So I think that's definitely a challenge for me as a mom, especially if they're so young right now. They're 4 and 6. But I think we have a broad view, and we try to be very realistic. We rarely shy away from subjects. Our 6-year-old is extremely curious and asks a whole lot of questions, and we always try to answer within his grasp.
Yeah.
And so we try not to shy away from stuff. We talk about things that happen in the world. He knows that there is a war going on in Ukraine, and we talk about it in a way that he can understand it right now.
Yeah.
Putin is a bad person, and he likes to say Putin. So
That's with Poop Farm.
Yes, exactly. I feel like I have a
Putin's a fun
theme
word.
here.
There's a theme.
I
in
definitely
this
have
family.
a theme. Definitely. Well, especially with boys.
Boys, yeah.
So, we try to be very realistic and just try to ride the crazy train that is parenthood, right?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I raise girls, and so I think you come at things a little bit different, especially as a dad of those girls. And then I think with a mom with boys,
Yes.
it's a little bit because I'm sure Tyrese is like,
just go, throw them, yeah.
do it. So it is a little bit interesting, because I would seem like I was really protective over the girls,
And I'm very protective
over
of
the
them,
boys.
yes.
Yeah, and so I get that, and
Yeah.
so what are some of the hot tips that you've found from parenting to be very helpful to you? So
I don't know, but I'll take some of them. No, we just try to be open and honest and just let the boys be them. They're boys, so you think, oh, they're going to play sports. We like to expose them to a lot of stuff. Our 6-year-old right now has absolutely no interest in sports, and we have no interest in pushing him.
Sure.
So whatever he wants to do, like right now, he really likes piano. He's taking piano lessons, and so he's going to be a little bit more creative. And if he changes his mind later and wants to do sports, we will. The 4-year-old is just finding his own feet, so we're going to let him kind of explore and do. But that's, I think, the biggest thing, like not thinking, oh, you have boys and you have to play sports, or oh, you have girls and you have to be a cheerleader. We just want them to be who they are and try to be as supportive of parents as we can.
I support that. As someone who is not really into sports and a little more on the creative side, I 100% support that. So.
Well, it's true. I mean, and I think you'll discover, because mine are grown now, and we have our grandson at our house with us now, and it's fun because they're two different people,
Right.
And raised by the same family. They went through the same stuff. I mean, there's no difference in how they were really raised, except for, we kind of let them choose their paths like that. But they're they come at things two different ways,
One of the things I learned pretty early on, we of course have adopted kids, so that's part of our story, but to step back and have your expectations of what their lives should be, not always be so firm and hard fast, because I have to remember they are unique people. Mm-hmm. We have influence on them, hopefully. At some point, but they will be their own unique people. And I see many parents, and I'm not necessarily being critical of anyone particularly, but see the stereotype of they're a boy, they're a girl, and think here's what they need to be. And I think that there's a lot more we can do to encourage them as they grow and learn different things, to expose them to things that you value, and to try and teach them what you believe and how you see the world, and to walk with them as they discover it for themselves and determine the things that they feel passionate about. We just came out of Black History Month, and we talk a lot about stereotypes, and they have different ethnic backgrounds than I do, and many of our kids. So we try and really focus on the beauty in the difference, and whether they're a boy and they love music or a girl who loves sports, that is not as important as what they believe about the world, what they believe about God, how they deal and think about family, and try and teach them those value things that are more the foundation, as we talked about, and then they can figure out how they express it.
Yeah, definitely.
That's worked for us, at least.
I'm an adopted child as well. So my parents are Caucasian. My older sister's Caucasian. She's adopted as well. And then my brothers, I have brothers that are twins that are just a few years younger than me. And we were all adopted from South Korea. Oh. We're not biological, but we were all adopted from South Korea. Okay. And then when I was a senior in high school, my mom thought that she found a lump in her breast. Turns out she did. It was a swollen mammary gland. She was pregnant. So this summer before I left for college, she had my baby brother.
Oh, wow.
So we have a very large, and the age span is great.
Wow. Yeah.
But our family it's very diverse, and we love that.
Yeah, that's great. And it's to be in a world now where that's a little more accepted, because I'm a little bit older than you by a lot. And so that wasn't the cool thing whenever I was growing up as a kid. And, the cool thing is now our daughters, even Clay already looks at the world in a very, very different lens than the ones that were previous to it. And I think that's important. So.
I agree.
Well, last month was Black History Month, Kevin, and this month, I believe, is all about women and everything.
Absolutely.
And I'm going to embarrass Keli a little bit because she was voted, and we didn't know this when we were having her on here, she's voted as one of the 31 most influential women in Jackson just recently as we're recording this. So congratulations on that.
Thank you.
That's very deserving.
I'm very honored, very honored.
We were talking a little bit before about the list. There were some really neat women on that list.
I'm honored to be among them.
Very influential in our area and our community. And so congratulations to all of those ladies.
Yes, indeed.
Very neat honor.
It's a great thing that the city does. I'm very grateful.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Tyrese and I always, because we have the last same name.
Yes, we're basically family.
Yeah,
that's right.
My brother. And
Long line of Millers.
Glad to have my sister-in-law here today.
Yes, I'm glad to be here. Very glad to be here.
Well, seriously, thank you for coming. And any decorating tips you have for the podcast room?
I think it looks great. You guys are doing great.
Yeah,
There's lots of M's.
Lots of M's. We've lost some stuff. We recently got rid of some of the food.
Yeah.
And so
Did you eat the food? Or?
No, we were able to move it on.
Okay.
He didn't let me have any of it.
Pass it on. There's a little bit left, not much. But thank you for coming in and doing this with us. We were looking forward to this very much.
Yeah.
It's my pleasure.
To have this conversation. We've been talking a lot about the news and news people and stuff, just different things, whether it be from all different aspects and stuff. And I got to think, if Keli will come, she'll set us straight. And so, but no, seriously, thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Hopefully we can have you back. And
I would love it.
Talk more. That'd be fun. Patrick, speaking of the news, we have lots coming up, I imagine, don't we?
I don't know that I need to do this in front of Keli. Maybe she'll give me some tips.
You're going to be great.
We do have a few things coming up here at Northside. We're going to edit this pause out.
You think we are. I'm the one doing it.
I should have had this ready.
Well, we could talk about the news in Cocaine Bear or something like that.
We could. I haven't watched it yet, but I really want to go see Cocaine Bear.
It's based out of Knoxville.
Yeah, when did that happen?
Off of a real story.
It was a TBI case, actually.
Oh, really?
Really?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
So she could give us the inside scoop.
That's really funny.
It was well before my time, but I have had to ask some folks because we did a little research and I was like, Cocaine Bear was a TBI case. Oh no.
Well, Josh was telling, he went and saw it. He's telling me yesterday, he said, it's really bloody and just kind of, he says, not what I thought it was going to be. So evidently they took that path with the movie.
I guess.
Well, I'm told it really wasn't as
big deal.
sensational
Yeah.
as
No,
the movie, I'm sure, is
no
making
way.
it. Yeah.
Actually, yeah, I follow a YouTuber, and he did a little thing on this story before the movie came out, and a hunter found the bear in the
Right.
woods, and it was
And then
already
they-
dead. And
Yeah.
Right, they
that's about
tested
it.
later and
Yeah.
found the
Yeah.
cocaine in his system, yeah.
The bear OD'd.
Yeah.
Is that what
Yeah,
they
basically.
say?
Basically, yes.
There's a
goodness.
package fell out of a plane or something, or got mishandled off
Yeah.
in the woods and
Yeah.
got into it.
Wow.
Yeah, they dumped it out of a plane as they were flying.
And
We
now
talk
it's-
about everything on Northside now.
now it's
You never know what you're gonna learn.
Now it's a major motion picture.
That's right.
So,
That's right. It's a film.
film. Do they don't even say major motion picture anymore, do they?
I think they do.
Do they still say it?
I hear celebrities talk about, I did this picture in that
Yeah.
picture. I think maybe the older ones. Y'all.
I grabbed my wrong piece of
I heard
paper.
Nick Cage say it.
I won't reveal the person, but I had the greatest time in the world last night. So someone in the youth group just got a Walkman. And
Yes, I heard about
Like
this.
a cassette Walkman?
A
cassette
Walkman?
Walkman. Oh, this gets
Where?
better, Patrick. Well, they bought it
Very
online.
excited about it
Find
too.
them. Okay.
Yeah.
They bought it online and it has a speaker on it. Well, so I was like, I'm going to bring you a cassette. Do you have any cassettes? Well, I'm getting some. From where? Well, I've got some I'm going to get. So I said, I'm bringing you one. So I just happen to have an old cassette. I have like 4 left. And the rest of them are like mixtapes.
Yeah.
Or
love a
something like that.
mixtape.
But I had one. It was the Glenn Miller In the Mood Christmas cassette that I picked up a million years ago. And so I handed them the cassette and said, here, and of course they were like, oh, that's pretty cool. Well, they hand it back to me and say, open it for me. Of course, it doesn't have a cellophane on or anything. And I was watching them and they were trying and I said, are you serious?
Are you talking about the case or
The
the cassette?
case, they didn't have to,
How to open the
case
case.
to get the cassette out.
Oh, yeah.
And then I was like, no, that's okay. I'll let you do it. And I'm cracking up. And Justin's there. We are laughing.
I know who this is.
So silly, yeah. And then we had to help them get it in because they're trying to get it in there, and they're trying to, because some are upside
Right.
down and some are straight in. Y'all, it was the best time in the world. It would be almost like watching somebody with a rotary phone right now. It was
goodness.
awesome. But they were elated on top of the earth and had a great time. And it's really fun. But I would have never dreamed that a kid would walk around in 2023 with a cassette player.
love it.
And everybody was they were all coming up and looking
What
at
is
it,
that?
touching it. And
How cool.
and it was
Retro.
like a
Yeah,
rock
right, exactly.
fell out of space and landed in our gym.
That's
It
fantastic.
was awesome.
Now, with headphones, or you said there was a speaker?
They didn't have a head. It has a speaker on too, but it has a headphone jack. They'd have headphones, so it has the little speaker. And the funny thing is, we used to think things could get so loud.
Uh-huh.
Oh, it's horrible. That thing
Yeah.
won't hardly play anything at all.
That's hilarious.
So now we like with the little speakers and stuff. Even our phones.
How do
better
you use your
speakers.
AirPods with it? How does that?
Yeah.
Yeah, no AirPods on
Bluetooth
this
connection?
one. No
Yeah, right.
Bluetooth. It was awesome.
Oh, I did this to my kids the other day. I put my fingers to my ear to tell my husband to call me. And my oldest was like, what are you doing? And I was like, I'm telling Daddy to call me. He was like this? So, like,
yes.
he doesn't,
Well,
he didn't even understand, like, what that meant.
So she's
I had
making the finger and
The finger
Yeah.
thumb.
Actually,
I heard a kid ask, why do we say hang up when we're talking about ending a phone call?
Yeah.
Why do we say hang up the phone? Because you don't hang
You push the button.
You push
Yeah.
the button. You don't actually hang it up on the wall
you
anymore.
can't hang up anymore.
I know.
my wife works for West Tennessee School for the Deaf, and she told me they just changed the
The sign.
from
Wow.
that to that. That is
Really?
actually the sign now.
Wow.
That you hold it up to your face.
So from the thumb and finger,
Right,
like
to
a
just
flip
cup
phone,
it.
to a cup where you're holding a
Yeah,
smartphone.
yeah.
Interesting.
So they just changed that.
But he looked at me like
Yeah.
I had grown a fifth eye.
Yeah,
I was
right.
like, what
exactly.
are you doing? And
That's
so,
awesome.
That is
Yeah,
funny.
it's
That's
definitely generations have changed.
yes.
All right. Well, back to
So Patrick, what do we have coming up here at Northside?
thanks for that intro music. Yeah, so this week is spring break for most schools around here. And because of this, we will not have any Wednesday night activities this Wednesday, March 15th. No Wednesday night activities. The office will still be open from 8 o'clock to 4 o'clock, but no Wednesday night activities. And then the next week, when we come back, March 22nd, we're going to have a slight time adjustment. So starting March 22nd, all the Bible studies and things after the service will start at 6:30 instead of 6:15. It's just a 15-minute bump back, so give a little more breathing room around the prayer service. That'll start the next Wednesday night. Then this coming Saturday, March 18th, we have the National Jamboree Pancake Breakfast in the gym. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, our Troop 203, our girls troop, they're going to be hosting a pancake breakfast. So they're going to National Jamboree, and there are other students, boys and girls, going from the West Tennessee Area Council. And so they're hosting a pancake breakfast here. It's $10. Come and eat some pancakes. I kind of giggled because pancake breakfast during Lent made me laugh. So, anyways, but yeah, come and support our girls. They're going to the Jamboree, and that's a really big deal.
This is Girl Scouts.
No, it's Boy Scouts.
Boy Scouts and Girl
Scouts of America. Troop 203. We have a girls troop.
I see.
So they're going to National Jamboree, and
cool.
so that's pretty cool. And recently, we just had the first female Eagle Scout. And so it's a big deal.
Oh,
so,
wow, that's awesome.
Yeah, so it's really exciting. So,
cool.
So come and have some pancakes during Lent. I give you permission.
The calories don't count that day.
The calories don't count that day.
All right. Well, also put on your calendar, starting April 2nd, that is Holy Week. So that's our next big thing. It's just a couple of weeks away. April 2nd is Palm Sunday. We'll have our regular church services, but then that afternoon from 3 o'clock to about 5 o'clock, we'll have our annual Easter egg hunt. Now it's an Easter egg hunt. How many eggs are we getting?
7,000.
7,000 eggs.
Whoa.
Yeah.
You better bring a big basket for
will.
those boys.
And there's also going to be a petting zoo and animal rides and inflatable jumpers and all sorts of stuff. And so it'll be a really big, fun event for the whole family. And then we'll have Good Friday service that Friday at 7 o'clock. I think that's April 7th at 7 o'clock p.m. And then we'll have Easter services on April 9th. There will be a sunrise service at 6 a.m. and then our regular Sunday schedule after that. So make sure you put those dates on your calendar. Also, don't forget to send in an email to the Board of Lay Elders at elders@northsidejackson.com and give them some feedback on service schedule and things like that. And then also on the website and on the app, and I think it went out in a church-wide email, is the Pastoral Search Team Survey. The deadline to turn that in is March 19th. So please make sure you fill that out this week because we need to hear from as many people as possible.
Yeah, and we talked about that last episode.
Yes.
So you can listen to that. If you go back into the archives, you can hear Ben Ferguson and Josh Allen.
And Ben Allen.
Yeah. Everybody points that out. The mistakes always get a lot of coverage, don't they, Kelly?
Always.
Yeah, so I mistyped that on one of the push notifications. So you're welcome.
We forgive you.
But anyway, what they had said, and I thought was really important, is if you don't give your opinion, it's really hard for the selection team to fully understand what the church body, church family really wants or feels that we're being called to do. We talked about this when it came to the church service, the positives and the negatives. So if you like things the way they are, tell us why. If you have some suggestions, give that to us as well. Remember that the people that are making the decisions are really focused on doing God's will and their people. So if you have a critique, say thank you first for their service and then give your opinion. But it really is important for us to all share and participate so that they make the wisest decision that they can in their position.
And it's smart to remember, we're all on the same team here. We're all wanting the same thing, the best for Northside. So, yeah, let's try to keep it civil, too.
Yeah, of course.
Definitely.
Yes.
Well, thanks for podcasting with me. And thanks to all of you out there in the world for listening. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please share it with others, post about it on social media, or leave a rating and review. To catch all the latest from us, you can follow us on Instagram at Northside Now Podcast. Go to our website, northsidejackson.com, or email us at podcast@northsidejackson.com. We hope to hear from you soon. Once again, this is Patrick.
This is Glenn.
I'm Kevin.
And I'm Kelly.
And that's what's happening at Northside Now.
Bye-bye.